Right, what are some of the biggest distance killers that could be in your golf game? We're going to cover those today. So if you don't hit the ball as far as you think you should, or maybe you play in a group of golfers and you're always the shortest, there's a very good chance that the reason for that is going to be covered in this video. We're going to be covering three things, and we're going to be starting with how you hold the golf club. We have to cover this, because if ever I see a golfer who doesn't hit the ball anywhere near as far as they should, it's almost always partly due to how they hold the golf club. So what we actually want to be doing is holding the golf club very much in the fingers. So as we look from down the line, if I open up my hand, you can see how the handle itself, or the grip of the golf club, runs pretty much through the base of my fingers. The reason that's important is because what it allows me to do, if I was to just hold my forearm in place, it allows me to create this movement with my wrist. This is the kind of hinging or cocking wrist set, whatever you want to call it, but this is the movement that we want. So without moving my forearm, I can get the golf club shaft up to horizontal, even just a little bit higher. It's that movement which we need in the golf swing. So this movement in the golf swing would look like this. And you'll see all the best players do that, some a little later than others, but when they get to the top, they've almost always got this angle between the lead arm and the golf club. That angle, as we start to come down, when we release it, is a huge source of power. What it also does, if we hold it in the fingers, it gives us a secure hold. Now, a secure hold in the fingers means that we can keep the wrists, what I like to call, fluid. And if we have the wrist fluid, we start to get that movement happening naturally. What's the distance killer? Well, the distance killer that I see is when that handle gets too high in the hand. So you can see how it's running more through the middle of my hand, through the lifeline. If I hold that club now and hold my forearm, I've got absolutely nowhere near as much range of motion. So I haven't got as much energy in this handle, in this grip, as I had in the previous one. Now, the wrists give us leverage. So when we don't have that ability to do that with the wrists, where do we often get that from? Well, we often get it from the arm. We see that arm bending and buckling to get some sort of length in the golf swing and to give us the sensation that we've got something that we can release into the golf ball. So if you have ever videoed your swing from the face on, you've seen your lead arm buckle excessively, check that grip, because it's often where it starts from. Now, when I hold the club in this fashion, it's not as secure in my hands. It doesn't feel that I've got as much control over that golf club. So what often happens is we grip a little bit tighter to give us that sensation of control. And when we grip a little bit tighter in the fingers, it often locks the wrist. So any kind of movement we had in that wrist gets reduced and taken out. So now I feel very stiff. And when I feel stiff, we get golf swings that kind of look like this, where they look very much like you're trying to overpower and over control the golf club, rather than letting the weight and the natural movement of the club swing around your body. Now, you can see I've just hit a couple of drives actually. I've just hit them with the blast sensor on. You can see that this first one, generally when I'm playing well, swinging at my best, I can get over 120 mile an hour club speed, and you can see that swing there was able to achieve that. But then I'm going to hit one now with this poor grip. I'm going to see what we can get. I reckon, well, it's going to be lower, I know that, but it'd be interesting to see how much lower. So I'm going to go right through the kind of lifeline of my hands, that to me that feels pretty terrible, and you know, straight away I feel like I've got less control of the golf club, so instincts kick in and I grip it a little bit tighter. So let's see what I can do from this position here. Oh, I nearly missed the ball and it's gone way out to the right, but that felt horrible. Now, what was that speed? I've got the app open here. Well, I thought I might be able to get over 100. You can see that's just under 100 miles an hour, so over 20 miles an hour slower. And what was interesting there was I felt like I was gripping it a little bit tighter at the start because it felt uncomfortable. But as soon as I started swinging it near the top of my golf swing, I actually felt the whole tension through my hand and my wrist get more, because the club was changing direction. I felt I was going to lose control of it, and it just felt very stiff, and there was no flow to that golf swing. So having the golf club too much through the palm of your hand is a massive distance killer. Get it more through the fingers. So the second reason that you could be losing distance often comes after some slightly poorer performances with the driver. And I'm going to run through a scenario. I've seen this so many times, and as I run you through this, you might think, yep, that's me. We have some rounds with the driver where it doesn't go particularly well. Maybe we're not hitting the centre of the club, or maybe the ball's veering off left and right and we lose confidence. And what happens, and this is often subconscious, not a something that we're intending to do, but we sort of stand there and think, well, the less things that move, the better it's going to be. The easier it's going to be for me to return the club to the ball and find the centre and have a little bit more control of it. So what we do is we take a setup, and we often find that the legs stay a little stiller than they should. We often find the hips don't rotate as much as they should. And we often find that the shoulders don't rotate as much as they should. And when we're hitting shots, it actually feels like we do have a little bit more control because there's less moving parts. But it doesn't work. It robs you of your distance, because turn and lack of turn is one of the big reasons why golfers aren't achieving the distance that they could. So what we have to do is make a free turn. We have to allow the shoulders to move, and if we want to allow the shoulders to move, it means we've got to move the hips, and if we want to move the hips, we've got to move the knees, and if we want to move the knees, we've got to have some feeling of what the ankles and the feet are doing. So, little exercise, really, really simple. You can do this with any of your golf clubs, but obviously I've got a driver here. Take that golf club, put it across your shoulders, and all you're going to do is you're going to take a set up to ball, and you're going to think about getting the grip, or whichever end is out this side, behind the ball. Really simple. Let's not overthink it. So the more I lock my knees, the more I feel like I'm going to be stable and, you know, reduce movement, the harder it's going to be to make any kind of movement behind that golf ball with the club. What happens when I try and get the grip behind the club? Well, what do we see? We see a big, big difference in what's happening with the legs. Just look at this. Left knee is increased in flex and moved towards the ball. Trail leg is reduced in flex, straightened a little bit. There's probably a gap between my legs. I call this daylight for distance. If I want someone to increase the speed and the distance, I try and get them to create daylight between the legs, as you can see there. What that's done, by moving my knees in that way, it feels a little different in my feet, but it allows my hips to turn, and that allows my shoulders to turn as well. If I can get the golf grip behind the golf ball, that's enough turn. When we actually stand there with a golf club and we're actually hitting a ball, we often find that we can actually move a little bit further than that, because there's a little bit more momentum and a little bit more intent. We're actually trying to, you know, generate some speed as opposed to just do a motion. So the key thing would be here, when I do this little exercise, what am I trying to do with my knees and my hips? Well, the answer might surprise you. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not standing here and saying, right, let's move my knees this way and let's move my left knee in and straighten this one. I'm simply trying to get the grip behind the ball, and I'm allowing my body to react to that. I'm allowing my body to do whatever it needs to do to allow me to make that movement. So these movements are fairly natural because I'm setting a task. The task is get the grip behind the ball, and my body is responding to that task. And that's a great way to think about it. Things will happen naturally if you set the right task and you have the right idea. As we said right at the start, there's a number of golfers I've seen who stand here and subconsciously everything's locked down. They don't turn the shoulders, and what happens is the arms get very narrow and very short, and then from there it's very, very difficult to create any speed. So have a nice free turn, and you've got to take that into the golf swing. So when I set it to this, what am I trying to do with my legs? Absolutely nothing. I'm trying to get my lead shoulder to move in behind the ball, and I'm allowing the rest of my body to react to that. And the number 3 reason why you're losing distance is down to sequencing. Sequencing is incredibly important. I've got a towel. I'm going to try and crack this towel. Let's think about how I would do that. There we go. So I can create a bit of speed in the end of that towel. But when we look at that from the face-on view, or this angle here, the speed at which my hand moves forwards is important. But the real key is how much my hand starts to slow down or decelerate. And if we watch from this angle here, you'll see that my hand goes this way and then almost pulls back towards me, which puts the speed out into the end of the towel, as you can see there. If I was to never slow my hand down, that's a completely different movement, completely different motion, and as you can see, there's nowhere near as much energy into that. So this little exercise gives us some insights as to what we actually have to do with the golf swing. The same thing applies. What I have to do with my lower body to get the most amount of speed into that club head is I have to have my lower body starting the movement, moving towards the target, creating some tension through my upper body, some torque, but then it has to slow down and brace, which is what allows me to get the speed out into the club head. That is almost, I'm going to say almost, 99%, almost impossible to do if you are a golfer who kind of lunges at the ball or they have poor sequencing. So you might be a golfer who gets to the top and your first move is to really get these shoulders going at it. The club starts to come down too soon, and because we didn't start with the lower body, we're now not really in a position where we can achieve that sort of decelerating phase, which puts the speed out into the club head. The best golfers in the world have the highest acceleration, yes, but they have the biggest deceleration, and that is really key. Poor sequencing makes it very difficult to do that. So here's the little exercise. Take your driver, set yourself up inside the golf ball, and very simply just bring your lead foot across to your trail foot. Now we're going to go very, very slow here, and the goal is not to create speed because we're just working on sequencing. The goal is to make some swings that feel that they're full of rhythm, there's a flow, there's a timing, it feels really smooth and effortless. So we're going to make a backswing, and as we get towards the end of our backswing, we're going to start by stepping across. Now the key thing here is it's where we're moving the pressure. It's not simply just me moving my leg. So we go back, we step, we swing through. We go back, we step, we swing through. Now there's no speed and I'm not hitting a golf ball, but I know that my sequencing is correct. My downswing technically is starting before my backswing finishes, because as the club is moving away from the target, my lower body is starting down. What that does is it puts a stretch across the body. That's really, really important. And then when we've planted and we've put that pressure, then we can start to apply those brakes and let that club swing through. So the sequencing is really, really important. And once you start to feel that this is comfortable, you can start to increase the speed. Now, with any luck, I make that look relatively easy. It's not for many of you. If your sequencing is poor, you might start to, see things that are a little bit more like this, where you can see things are way out of sync. And if that happens almost the first time you do it, that should really be, a light bulb moment for you, or an alarm bell ringing that you need to do this little exercise. I see all sorts of, different movements when I give this little exercise to a golfer. So get to the point where it feels really nice and smooth, and then you can start to increase the speed. And I really feel now that that planting of that foot is almost a catalyst for the speed of my golf swing. It's that pressure that goes through that left side that really allows me to then push, brace, and get the club out with as much speed as possible. Poor sequencing, where we're lunging at it and it feels all rushed and ugly and horrible, is a big reason why golfers lack distance. So let's go ahead and hit one. I'm actually going to do the little exercise. This might not be the straightest drive I've ever hit, but we should be able to get some pretty good sequencing in this. So I'm going to go up, step, and give it a hit. Not bad, a little bit out of the heel, but it's actually right down the middle of the fairway. So this video was all about how you can create some more power. We didn't cover things like strike or, cutting across the ball, because they're sort of ways that the power gets transferred to the ball. This video is really looking at what you do as the golfer and how you can maximize the power that you generate to give you longer drives. If you can tick all those 3 boxes, make sure you're not struggling with any of those, you can hit the ball longer, trust me.